Breaking moments ago, officials tell CBS News the casket of conservative activist Charlie Kirk will be flown from Utah to Arizona on board Air Force Two. Kirk was a close friend of both President Donald Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance. He has even been credited with telling the president he should pick Vance for the role. Now, in a lengthy post honoring his late friend, the VP says in part, Charlie Kirk was a true friend, the kind of guy you could say anything to and know it would always stay with him. Also important to note, Vance canceled his 9/11 travel plans today to visit Kirk's family instead. Let's bring in CBS News Executive Director of White House and Politics, Fin Gómez. Fin, thank you for joining us. What did Charlie Kirk mean to Vance and to the president as well? And to the Republican Party, too. So many people just talking about how he was a great guy.
Well, look, Charlie Kirk and Vice President Vance are very close. As you mentioned, Mugo, he's close with the president and also the vice president. But with Vance, it goes back. It goes back to 2021, when Vance was considering a Senate run in his home state, Ohio. One of the first people that he reached out to was Charlie Kirk. And Charlie Kirk has been a longtime advocate, really since then, for Vice President Vance. In fact, last year, if you recall, Mugo, when there was the Veep stakes, when there was that run-up to the Republican National Convention, and the president was deciding who to pick to be his running mate, Charlie Kirk was a big advocate for Vance in that particular process, and a main reason that he was picked, according to sources close to that process that I spoke to. He's also been very close to the president. As I said, many Republicans and many Trump advisors that I've spoken to since Charlie Kirk's assassination yesterday have told me that they point and they credit Kirk with the president in his campaign doing so well with Generation Z voters last year. Now, Turning Point USA, that is the political organization that Charlie Kirk co-founded back in 2012. It's bigger than just MAGA youth activist group. It's bigger than that. It really has. It helped in many ways take the place of the RNC in trying to mobilize Republican voters and using new methods, including new media, social media, to really try to propel the president's campaign last year. And if you recall, also amongst Generation Z voters, Trump did very well, gaining a majority, actually, of young white male voters in last year's election. And again, many of those close to Trump that I spoke to credit Charlie Kirk with that accomplishment.
And Fin, so let's dig in deeper into that. Why is that? What is it about Charlie Kirk that got those young people, especially those young male white voters, to turn to President Trump when it came to voting on the ballot box?
Muga, that's a fantastic question. And actually, before this, I spoke to a Gen Z expert who told me that in part it was because in the aftermath of the pandemic, there was this sense by many within that demographic, the Gen Z demographic, who felt that there was an overregulation during that time. If you recall, a lot of their academic careers were stopped, right? They had, they were in college and they had to come out, and there was like Zooms, and there was a sense now post that experience that there was a sense of being against overregulation, and I think Charlie Kirk really tapped into that. He also tapped into some topics that were that caused controversy, including race, including on the argument and discourse on various issues that were controversial. However, he also had a lot of support, and you could see that. I mean, in his 3-hour daily show that he had on YouTube called The Charlie Kirk Show, he had a big following, and just on social media alone. I mean, Gen Z voters, Gen Z audience members really have been affected by Charlie Kirk. Some of my colleagues told us that they first heard about this killing because of their kids or younger folks they knew who got the news from social media. So I think his ability to utilize that medium was very effective, not just for President Trump, but the Republican Party as a whole.
Yeah. Fin Gómez, thank you so much for your time today.